Okay, go ahead, Pat.
So as my introduction, as I mentioned before, I've been trying to coerce Kate to getting involved in scouting. And we've been very busy going around and talking to Rotary clubs to get people to understand what's going on in Ukraine and to keep that up in the forefront. It seems, with some of the other things going on in the world, we're kind of forgetting the fact that Ukraine is still in a fight right now and they're fighting for their lives. Um, and so I thought, I would like to, get her to. I actually got a Ukrainian scout neckerchief, and I was like, we need to get this out the out into public so they can see that there are Ukrainians in their own communities, and that this is important. And so um, I've been trying to get her involved in it. And then I looked up Ukrainian scouts in the United States, and I ran across this crazy site, this Plus Ukrainian Scouts USA, and I was like, I had no idea who the heck are these people. And so I contacted them, and Andy contacted me back, and I thought this would be a great presentation for us to learn about something we weren't aware of. And so I would like to introduce Andy, and Andy, we can make you like a co-sponsor or a co-host so you can share your screen. If you
Okay.
Already set it up so that he could share.
Oh, you already got set up?
Yep.
Okay, great. And so take it away.
Thanks a lot, Pat. Let me give it a shot here. Choose what to share. Time screen. The system, I don't seem to. Okay, I have that up.
It's not up yet.
You're not sharing yet.
No, I'm not. So I have choose what to share with app.zoom, and it doesn't seem to give me a.
Should give you a window with your whatever you're sharing.
Yeah. Let me go to window
Whatever.
instead of
By application, it was a PowerPoint.
yeah. Okay.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Thanks, Pat. So Plast is the name given to Ukrainian scouting. It started in Ukraine 112 years ago. Modeled after the Boy Scouts, obviously. Plast was built on a Christian worldview and the idea of loyalty to the Ukrainian nation. It is organized a little differently than Boy Scouts. We have 4 branches, and essentially Cub Scouts, which combines boys and girls, the Boy and Girl Scouts, which are combined, Rover Scouts, obviously slightly older, and then Senior Scouts. So you can be a scout all your life, and basically everything is volunteer. We have, I think, 1 staff member in the US. We do have some paid staff in Ukraine, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So essentially, after founding, Ukraine went through some dramatic events following World War I. It did declare its independence for a short time period, but then between the Polish nation and communists who took over Russia, the Soviets, it was basically split up. It did operate under Polish rule, but it was underground. It was outlawed both by the Soviets as well as in Poland, but the Poles were a little more lenient. So it did get to operate in Poland. However, when it was in Poland, to get around kind of the illegality of it, they ended up forming a bunch of sports clubs and other organizations that were allowed, but they were all under the Plast umbrella. But this coming weekend, next coming weekend, I'm going to a ski race, which is sponsored by the Carpathian Ski Club. And I'm told that it's their 100-year anniversary. And I'm told they're the oldest ski club in the world. And they were founded as part of Plast to get around the illegality of Plast in Poland. So that organization still exists, and a lot of Plast members run that and take part in that as well. After World War II, many of the refugees from Western Ukraine, the Polish part that had been occupied, fled the Soviets, ended up in displaced persons camps where they restarted Plast. And from there, they were dispersed all over the world. So any country that took in Ukrainian refugees ended up with some form of Plast in their country. And then with Ukrainian independence in 1991, Plast was reborn in Ukraine itself. Next slide. So we have an umbrella organization, Plast Conference. I think there's 13 members or so. We meet every once in a while. We met most recently this past year in Poland, and I took advantage of that with my wife, and we did travel to Ukraine from Poland. At that point, I was still the head of Plast in the U.S., which I had been the head for the prior 4 years, and that was the end of my terms. Essentially, the umbrella organization tries to standardize what is done, standardize many of the merit badges. They do allow the separate countries to put their own spin on things. But we are one organization, one group of scouts. We are divided by one common language, just like Churchill said of the English. Our Ukrainian is quite a bit different than most of Ukraine, because most of it came from Western Ukraine. And then it's been here in Canada and the US, and it's developed a slightly different direction, similar to what's happened in Quebec with their French. Their French is different than the French spoken in France. But we certainly can understand each other. However, the Ukrainians have this tendency to take on English words, and we have a bunch of words here that we thought were the right words, but obviously we were wrong. So as an example, Ukrainians will call basketball basketball. That's not what it's called among Ukrainian Americans. For the organization as a whole, all the funds are kept in the U.S. The treasurer is always a U.S. citizen. And obviously that was a relief at one point a couple of years ago. We did just pass the 2-year anniversary of the start of the full-scale invasion. The current head of this organization is Canadian, lives in Kyiv. He told me something interesting when we met at our get-together recently. He said he left Kyiv when the invasion occurred, and they were gone for a month. And he left a Russian-speaking city and came back to a Ukrainian-speaking city. So Ukraine has Putin to thank for uniting it, for converting many people to actually speak Ukrainian. Because the majority prior to the invasion, probably the majority in the country spoke Russian primarily, just because Russian culture dominated. Now, obviously, Western culture, US culture, that it has been growing, and at this point, obviously, that's going to be dominant going forward. US, about 3,000 members, variety of ages. There are major centers wherever immigrants settled and then moved outward. Say New Jersey is kind of a Newark, New York. Do I have Yonkers? I may have missed one. Oh, there it is, Yonkers. Greater New York got a lot of immigrants, and they moved to the suburbs, but the centers still kind of stayed in the major cities. At this point, we're starting to get a lot more immigrants going all over the US. So we are starting to see interest in expanding into much further out to Research Triangle area in, I guess, North Carolina, into, there used to be a center in LA, but San Diego seems to be an area that attracts a lot of people, and a couple other spots in the US. We do own our own campgrounds, 2 in New York, 1 in Ohio. Obviously, they were purchased because it was kind of central to where all the immigrants ended up after World War II. And the first one they bought in New York, they had to get on a bus, and they had a suitcase full of cash, and they went with the cash to buy somebody's old farm. I think like 160 acres, Chatham, New York, and the camp's still there. And it's run all by volunteers. There also are Rover Scout groups will run rock climbing, water sports. The Sea Scouts will do various camps on islands or on some reservoirs out in Pennsylvania, most recently. Bicycling, skiing. I think they had horseback riding a couple of years. So a whole variety of activities. And then there's a whole bunch of things to tie the kids together with either fall or spring badge and competition weekends. And then one thing that just happened 2 weeks ago is debutante balls, when the kids get to be 15, 16. That's the big thing for all the youngest counselors to find. The girls actually have to ask the boys to attend the debutante ball, but all the kids look forward to that. They get tuxes and learn how to waltz and polka and do other dances. And they really look forward to that. And that's one of the big draws. I think one of the differences we have, most or all of the activities are run by the Rover Scouts or by older scouts themselves. So we might have 17, 18-year-old scouts as counselors for the 7, 8, 10-year-olds. And the kids, it's been getting younger and younger, but the kids that are actually management for these camps might be in their early 20s. And they might have 500, 600 kids in a camp. The campgrounds themselves have a group that runs them. Obviously, it's a lot of work involved, a lot of maintenance, a lot of construction, project management to keep those things running. And that's typically an older crowd that runs that. Although we do we try and draw on our Rover Scouts and get them involved, because at some point they're going to have to take over. In the US now, the vast majority of the new Cub Scouts are not refugees as much as immigrants. We do have a significant number of refugees. We did host them at our camps for free the last 2 years, as well as they could participate in the weekly events that are run at our centers for free. And obviously all the groups would go out of their way to find them camping gear. So camping gear and scout uniforms, because many of these people fled with small suitcases and really weren't, obviously didn't have everything they would need with that. As I said, we have one paid position here in the US, and it's actually a part-time position. The organization is run as non-political, interdenominational. We actually, within Ukraine, have a couple of religions, Orthodox and Ukrainian Catholic. And now we're starting to get a few that are Jewish, and I don't know, we certainly have some mixed marriages as far as racially mixed. And so we're becoming more of just like the rest of America, being quite diverse. So let me go on. Plast Ukraine, this is where it started. And the hope when my parents fled the Soviets, my father actually fought the Soviets, was heavily wounded, ended up luckily in some Austrian castle with, he said, a nice Austrian woman taking care of him before they took him away to a hospital. But their hope was to return to Ukraine. They didn't think they were going to stay very long. They thought the Soviet Union would collapse from internal stresses and they would get back. Well, they did not, but they did make a pretty good life wherever they ended up, in Australia and Canada, here in the US. I actually have family that ended up both in Canada, Australia, as well as the US, more distant family that's in Great Britain and in Germany, as well as Ukraine. So people got scattered to the four winds. But currently, Plast in Ukraine, approximately 10,000 members. A good chunk of those are fighting. A good chunk of the kids spend a lot of their activities in support of the war effort. We here in the US, we put together, with the help of actually a lot of Boy Scout troops and other independent troops, we put together something like 100,000 medical kits in the first year and a half of the war. Currently, we're doing a Warm Socks, Warm Hearts program where we're stuffing socks with emergency blankets, some candy bars, and a couple of other items, and shipping that off. So in Ukraine, obviously, they are doing that plus more. A lot of support for the refugees who fled Eastern Ukraine. An interesting thing, this Plast in Ukraine is quite popular. They have a waiting list for admission. And I've been told that women, when they get pregnant, put their kids on the waiting list, or put their kids to be. It's quite popular. It's very low cost. They do have actually a full-time fundraising group. So a lot of their funds come from donations. It doesn't cost much, if anything, to belong. But the limiting factor there is counselors. So kids who have gone through the program, know the program, and can teach the program to others. So that limits how many new people or new children can be admitted. So obviously there's a war going on. Ukrainian scouts over the last 100 years have fought the Russians, the Soviets, the Nazis, the Soviets again, and now the Russians again. 44 scouts have paid the ultimate price. They fulfilled their vows to be faithful to the Ukrainian nation. The original Ukrainian sea drone that has been in the news for sinking a couple of Russian ships, that was built by a friend of mine who's a Ukrainian Sea Scout. A couple of his buddies here in the US shipped him a bunch of jet ski engines, and the first one he put it together pretty quickly. It was a little rudimentary, but they've developed that into a weapon that's now sinking warships. So that's thanks to the Sea Scouting. I told you that 49 have been killed. Scouts do what scouts do. They enter the special forces. Many of them have been killed behind enemy lines. They stopped the initial attacks in Kyiv and Hostomel. They've been involved in this war for the last 10 years. The first scout to die was an American. He was from New Jersey, a friend of mine. He was U.S. Special Forces, went there when the Russians first invaded. Scouts for Ukraine. I finished my tour as the head of Plast USA. I've stayed on for Scouts for Ukraine. We started when the war started. We have a fundraising group, marketing, logistics. We've raised a fairly good chunk of money. We've shipped a whole lot more goods than what we've raised. One of our scouts, it wasn't a special forces. He found a Marine storage warehouse that had 20,000 body armor suits that had expired, were going to be thrown away. He got them shipped. And that was at the start of the war. We've shipped a significant number of mobile field hospitals. We help other organizations that ship medical gear. We initially, when the war started, we were purchasing something called fixators and vacs. They're like a vacuum machine that sucks keeps a wound clean. Wound vac, it's called. And the associated good supplies that make those things run. And as I said, we created a logistics group. We happen to have 3 guys that work for logistics companies, Maersk and 2 other smaller private organizations, and they're still in our group. We can ship anything from China, from here to anywhere in the world with those guys. Most of it, a lot of it, we got shipped for free in the first months. One of them got Maersk to fund a Boeing 747 that was filled with gear everywhere from Calgary to Chicago to here, and then flown over. Since then, we just shipped container loads most recently. Obviously, we try and find high value goods to go by air. Other stuff we can ship, we've shipped pickup trucks, ambulances, that sort of thing. We also support Plus Poland, which has a lot of refugees that they're taken care of, as well as Plus Ukraine. We pay for, I think we spent almost $50,000 last year transporting kids to camps in Europe, outside of Ukraine. We supplied Christmas dinners, something like $20,000 worth. And I think our total spend last year was about $250,000. We're currently raising funds for an endowment. We have one endowment, $100,000 that we've raised for one of our scouts that was killed. He was a graduate of the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv, and that endowment sits there for scouts. And we're raising a second one, and that will also go to the Ukrainian Catholic University. I don't know if you guys know, but John Helka, I don't know if he's the current or former head of Rotary. But he's a former Plus Scout. His sister, who I used to go to a Sea Scout camp with when we were quite a bit younger. She heads the Ukrainian Catholic University's fundraising arm here in the United States. I think that's about it. Get back to the meeting. One interesting thing, with my foot in the air, I have a lot of time to read books, and I read a book on the history of Ukraine and the Alaska Purchase. Alaska Purchase came about because the Russians sank their fleet outside of Sevastopol and it was all wooden sailing fleet, and they obviously lost the war, lost their fleet. The British had steamships. The Russians had no steamships. So the Russians needed money to build a fleet, a modern fleet. And they came to the U.S. figuring they might as well get some money out of it before they lose it to the U.S. And the one thing they didn't want to have happen was have British Canada take over Alaska. So after the Civil War, because the Civil War obviously slowed things down, they reconnected with Andrew Johnson after Lincoln was killed. And I guess during negotiations about Reconstruction and a bunch of other stuff that was going on, they wanted to also, the Johnson administration wanted to divert attention from the domestic issues. So it was an opportune time to make a purchase. So $7.2 million in 1867. That's equivalent in 2022 dollars to 125 million. So Alaska turned out to be a bit of a bargain, and the Russians are regretting it. And lo and behold, the Russian fleet is being sunk outside of Sevastopol harbor again. So I think there might be an opportunity for the U.S. to maybe acquire some more territory in a few years, hopefully.
Do you know what the at the time of the purchase of Alaska, what that was referred to in the paper as?
There's a bunch of things. Seward's Folly.
Seward's Folly is the big one. Yeah,
Yeah. But
because he was the Secretary of State at the time.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. Does anyone have any questions tonight? Hey, Lisa.
Pat, you're
have
on
a
mute.
question. Do you need any volunteers in North Carolina by any chance?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you need any volunteers in North Carolina by any chance?
Not that I know. There was one. Things are at the beginning stages. From what I know, some of these other locations, it's an all volunteer organization, so you can only do so much. But we are dependent on having somebody who's been through the system, who knows scouting to a great extent. Otherwise, it gets very difficult. The program is, basically focused on getting the older kids to teach the younger kids. They go to training courses. They go for a couple of weeks to get accredited as counselors. And then they can be counselors at our camps, as well as return to their centers and be counselors for younger kids. And one of the big draws, the reason they do that is because we happen to have boy counselors and girl counselors at the same time in the same place. So that seems to be a big attraction for the kids. It continues their social ability to interact socially with their peers. These organizing these older camps again gives them another option. So going through the system, being part of it, is quite critical to them, and they take advantage of it. And then it builds lifelong friendships that they tend to maintain. Even though, obviously we're U.S. citizens, I was born here. My kids still speak Ukrainian, although their Ukrainian isn't quite as good as mine. But when they were in Ukraine, my daughter sarcastically told me that somebody else told her that her Ukrainian was very good. So there, which her boyfriend said, well, Mr. Kozak, I'd call that a win for you. So when we go to Ukraine, people think we're either from Poland or Canada or some other part of Ukraine. We're not necessarily mainstream because of our accent and the words we choose. But yeah, getting back to your question, we don't have anything right now that's fully formed that you could participate in, unfortunately.
And another question. So how do you call basketball?
Koszykówka.
Well, that makes sense. Really?
Right. There's all these words that That's people came here to the U.S. and they literally translated basketball
Yeah.
into Koshik, which is basket, and ball. Well, there's no ball in that, but Koshik. So it made sense to us. So it's just a funny thing, and we here in the U.S. have to get over it and learn what they're speaking in Ukraine, which my mother would drive her nuts because my mother, she would claim everything was Russified, but in fact it was Polish. It was all kinds
Yeah.
of, and they grew up in Lviv, so much of what the words they used were Polish words, clearly recognizable as Polish words, even though they wouldn't admit it.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that Kate might have been asking is there a way for her to actually be a member at large or to be somehow affiliated with the organization?
We do have individual members at large. They're always looking for people to help them run their organizations. So I can reach out to the people who do this and say, have you thought of something like this? And how easy would it be? So I have your contact info. I would reach out to them. I don't know them personally, or I would have done it already, but I did see your email, and I can chat with them and say,
I would be
we're
very
always
happy to help.
glad to hear that.
Well,
And I'll be back in touch.
through
I'm just
Rotary,
curious.
we have, I think, 4 or 5, probably more families that are being located here in Eastern North Carolina. I know Wilmington has 4 or 5 families now, and I know there's another one coming on their way. So we're starting to get quite a collection here on the coast.
Yeah, and it's all like young families, mostly mothers with their children here, and like they don't have a community. They don't have anybody to,
Right.
talk to even. So it would be
Sure. I know that we had 2 refugees. I'm in Vermont, and there are not many Ukrainians here, a few, but one of the two women who were best friends came here. They were sponsored, and one after a year. She didn't like the climate, but also for her kid, she moved to the Washington, D.C. area because there's a large community there. There's a school there. There's weekly activities. So she moved there, and she's very happy that she did. Her friend stayed because they're in a great school system. Her son has some learning issues, and the woman was just so enthralled with the teaching. When they came here, the school had a handbook they gave them of everybody's picture and a little description of all the kids. So, and the community really opened up their arms to them. So and now they're skiing, from what I'm told, every weekend because they have a ski program at the school.
Before we move on to the next question, Pat, did you need to jump for a meeting too?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Did you need to jump for a meeting?
No, I didn't jump. I don't need to jump.
Oh, okay. Did you have another question earlier?
No, that was my
No.
question.
Okay. Jim, you had your hand up?
Sure. It's more of a comment, and it's really for Andy and Kate and Pat. So the General Secretary of Rotary International, which is like the CEO, Andy, I think you mentioned this. His name is John Hugo.
Yeah.
He grew up in Michigan. He was a scout in Michigan, but he lived in Kiev for a good part of his professional career, and he's a member of the Rotary Club of Kiev. So if there's ever a need or just a desire to connect with him, I'd be happy to connect any of you with John.
Yeah, thanks. I have his cell phone.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll let him know you spoke to my club then.
Excellent. Jenny, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm from Buffalo, New York. So I'm just wondering, how big is Plast in Buffalo?
Oh, it used to be very big. It's smaller now in Buffalo itself. It's quite large in Toronto,
Okay.
St. Catharines. The other scout camp is in just outside of Buffalo. There's one in Ohio, but where the hell's Well, I may or may not be able to figure out I forgot the name of the town. I just know the name of the camp in Ukrainian, so that's not going to help you. But it's somewhere to the south. It's like 20 miles away from Buffalo. But I don't know how many people are currently in Buffalo itself, but there is a center there. There
Yes.
used to be a lot more.
Mhm.
There's centers in Rochester, in Syracuse. You know, New York's obviously a very populated state. And Visakil, I can't remember. Yeah, sorry, the name slips. It's a small town, but it's a very pretty area. And actually, that was where we doubled the size of the campground. We bought, I think, 88, either doubled from 40 to 80 or 80 to, no, it must have been 40 to 80, something like that, about 3 years ago. Which is the first time we expanded or purchased land in 40 years or so. So that was one of my big accomplishments, was that purchase, raising lots of money, which we needed for that purchase. So I was quite proud of that.
Well, thank you, Andy. We are a few minutes over, so we'll go ahead and end here. One of the things that I would like to see this group do is grow outside of VSA. So if anyone in your organization would be interested in a Rotary Club that focuses on scouting, we would love to have them come and visit us and consider becoming a member of our club. And so please pass that along. And for our members, this presentation came about because Pat went out and, found this connection. But if you have other ideas for meetings, we would love to pursue them and get them on the calendar. Our meeting in 2 weeks is Lisa. She's going to be talking about mental health first aid. And so, but most of our meetings after that are open. So if you come across something that would be interesting to Scouters, please bring it forward. Okay. If there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and ring the bell if I can find it again. Yep, there it is. Oh, I turned the volume all down. There we go. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to stop recording.